There we are. First mistake of the day. I forgot to turn the mic on. Now, I have to tell you, before I start the formal proceedings, we're here to talk about women in politics. And there are particular practical difficulties for women in politics, one of which I have just faced, which was a body mic not working, no women broadcaster around, and wearing a dress. I won't show you where the mic is, but that are problems that women have to face that men generally don't have to face. So I think we're wired for sound, so welcome all of you to the Scottish Parliament and to the Scotland Women's Stand event. This is the first of its kind, as the Scottish Parliament and the Parliament Project have been working in partnership to deliver this very unique event for all women across Scotland to mark the 20th anniversary of our Parliament. And of course, as well as everyone here today, and it's great to see the place so full, we're joined by women from across Scotland at 4 regional hubs via the Parliament's webcast and Facebook Live this morning. So welcome to all of you from Aberdeen, Lerwick, Stornoway and Lochgilphead. We also have a first for our Parliament, I think, because we have a graphic illustrator, Linda Hunter and Assistant Claire McIntyre, who are working at the back of the debating chamber to create a visual record of the session. I wasn't able to properly hear it, but I want to thank our 3 pipers from Lochgelly High School who kicked the day off in such a great fashion. Now, this morning we do have inspiring speakers, and we have 4 elected women who will join us for a question and answer session about getting involved in politics. And the panellists represent different spheres of elected office that women can, and I would say should, stand for in Scotland. So it's really good to welcome you all here on a day that sees all this energy, all this women's energy coming together right across the country to explore how here in Scotland women can be motivated, encouraged and supported to stand for positions of elected representation at every opportunity in their communities, in their local government areas and of course nationally. As I said, this year the Scottish Parliament celebrates its 20th anniversary, and it was the 12th of May 1999 that Winnie Ewing MSP announced the Scottish Parliament, which adjourned on 25th March 1707, is hereby reconvened. There were 4 main principles underpinning the aims: openness, accountability, the sharing of power and equal opportunities. We're 20 years on, and these founding principles continue to underpin the work of the Parliament and its members. We're continuing to build strong foundations of equal opportunities, included, for example, facilities such as a public creche, which at the time of its introduction was the first of its kind in any European Parliament. Parliamentary recess dates are mainly scheduled to fit in with school holidays, and there's a maternity mentoring scheme open to Parliament staff. In more recent years, we've been very active in dealing with the challenges women face, women in particular face. Last session, we had an event here in the Chamber focusing on inspiring young women as they were deciding what their hopes and dreams were for the future. That work has continued into the current session with the Young Women Lead programme. That's an initiative that I think is absolutely marvellous, and I'm delighted to be involved with it. It's an award-winning leadership programme for young women aged under 30 who live in Scotland, and it focuses on increasing political participation. The programme was created from a need to address the underrepresentation of women in politics. Working with the Parliament, the Young Women's Movement Scotland has designed a programme for 30 participants at a time from a range of diverse communities, coming together in their Parliament to run their own committee inquiry, and it focuses on a topic of their choice. It uses innovative new media, and the group connects diverse young women's voices with MSPs, the Scottish Government's Equality Unit and beyond, and Parliamentary digital and engagement staff. It's a really fitting and a really worthwhile programme, and it will hopefully help increase the activity of young women in politics in Scotland. At the moment, women's representation in this Parliament sits at just under 36%. That's a joint 27th place in the ranking of international legislatures. We fare better than our colleagues at Westminster. They're currently at 39th place. But I won't be happy until we climb further. We need an additional 26 places to be precise about that. The highest ranking European nation is in fact Sweden. They're just under 44% of women's representation. And the fact that even they are not at 50 shows that generally we have a long way to go. So today, I hope you feel comfortable in your Parliament, and I'm genuinely looking forward to hearing from you. I hope that this event will inspire you to perhaps stand for elected positions and keep doing it and keep encouraging other women to do it until there's 51% of female representation. Right across the board. Community councils, youth parliament, local government, and of course your Scottish Parliament. Because it's only when we reach that that it will truly reflect who we are as a nation. Women, welcome again, diverse, passionate about representative democracy working. And let's all work together to represent the interests and needs of Scotland. Thank you very, very much for being here. It's now my pleasure to introduce Lee Chalmers, founder and director of the Parliament Project, and Patricia Kupiec, director of the YWCA in Scotland. Lee founded the Parliament Project in June 2015 and she remains a director. Since 2004, Lee has been running her coaching and development company, Authentic Living, and she oversees specialised one-to-one leadership coaching as part of this work. Patricia has been the director of YWCA Scotland since January 2018, and she manages the board's strategic mission into their day-to-day work. Currently, she is working voluntarily with the 30 Under 30 YWCA campaign and assists in creating short profiles on 30 inspiring women under 30 years old. And I hope that work continues until we see great results from it. So please, Lee and Patricia, if you would talk to us for around 10 minutes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Lee, and can I just say how amazing it is to stand here and look out on an entire chamber full of women? It's amazing, as it should be. This is what we're aiming for. So I'm Lee.
I'm Patricia.
And come. We came together last year in June to work on a project called 100 for the Hundreds, where we brought together 100 women in a very small, hot room in Edinburgh. Some of you are there, I can see you in the audience, to celebrate the 100 years of some women, getting the right to vote, and to talk about what we need to do in order to move that forward. And some of those images will be appearing on our screen. And thank you very much to the government for funding that. We were absolutely delighted to work with the Young Women's Movement. And yes, would you like to talk to us a bit about that, Patricia?
Yeah, sure. So for us, that day was especially important because it was also the graduation day for our first Young Women Lead program. And Linda already explained about the program. So I'm just going to say that this year we are just about to launch the third Young Women Lead program, and we are doing things slightly differently. So in consultation with the ethnic minority staff network here at the Scottish Parliament, but also in a response to the fact that there has never been a woman of ethnic minority background elected to the Scottish Parliament, this year we are opening the program only to young women under the age of 30 that come from ethnic minority backgrounds. And for myself as a migrant woman, I would have loved an opportunity like this one when I first came to Scotland 13 years ago. And today I'm really proud and really honored to be leading an organization that's been fighting and advocating for the rights of women to be at the very heart of the place that I'm now standing in for over 150 years. And if a daughter of a cleaner and a plumber from Poland can do this, I believe that all of us can do it. And I hope that this day is going to inspire many of you to become more politically active, to stand for election, because I think today, more than ever, we need those diverse voices, we need those new perspectives, we need fresh perspectives, we need to have gender equality. I think it's so important, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the day unfolds, but also seeing its legacy in days to come. And I believe from running programs like Young Women Leads, we've really seen that those small acts of pulling together can create a massive change. And I believe that we are going to witness the start of a change like this today. And I'm really excited that we can be a part of it. And on behalf of everyone at Young Women's Movement, enjoy today, create those connections, get ready to mobilize, and let's make gender equality reality together.
And in the Parliament project, what we do is we work to encourage women to stand for election. And why do we do that? We do that partly because of the issues that we earlier heard, but also partly because the research shows that men are, in general, more likely to wake up one morning and say, hey, I think I'll become a politician. Whereas we are much more likely to go for it if someone says to us, you would make an excellent MSP, you would make a fabulous councillor. Then we go, really? Could I? And we start to consider the skills that we have that might be relevant to politics. So we run workshops all over the UK. Over 3,000 women have come to our workshops to hear about how they can get inspired. I can see some of you here that have been, who are ready to take your next steps. Also for this event, you know, sometimes we read in the press that women are not interested in politics. Have you heard that? We could have had 800 women in this room, easily. There's 300 women on the waiting list for this. There's 100 women in the hubs. Hello, hubs. Hello, hubs. That's just this one day. Imagine if even half of those took it forward and got elected. It would transform the nature of our politics in Scotland. So we are delighted to be here. It's incredibly exciting. What we want from this event is we want you to go forward, to be inspired by the voices that you hear, whatever stage it is that you're at, to just nudge it forward a little bit so that we can get more women elected. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee and Patricia. I'd now like to introduce Christina McKelvey, MSP, Minister for Older People and Equalities, and she's held that post since 2018. She's been an elected member of this Parliament since 2011 and is constituency member for Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse. Christina has also been chair of the Scottish Parliament's Equalities and Human Rights Committee, and prior to that, she was convener of the Parliament's European and External Relations Committee. Minister, please.
Good morning, everybody. My Goddy, yes, sight for sore eyes. Absolutely fantastic. I've got a stinking cold and I could have rolled over and went back to sleep this morning. I thought, no, I've got to go and hang out with some amazing women. So thank you for giving me that motivation this morning, because that's something I'm going to talk about. Can I thank the Parliament Project and the presiding officer and everybody that's organised this event for inviting me along, because as you can tell, I quite like them. But my goodness, when we talk about a Parliament takeover, yeah. We get work to do, haven't we? And it's so wonderful to see this place absolutely filled with women, and it's great to have you all here today. You know, whatever decisions you take forward, hopefully you'll have learned something today that will allow you to do that. I want in the not-too-distant future for this place to be a 50-50 Parliament. But listen to the presiding officer, because we always listen to the presiding officer, because she's always right. She said 51%, so I'm just going to add that wee percentage on and do that. But I'm really glad to be here today to talk about equal representation and how that matters and how that ties in with human rights. It's something that's very important to me. So I can summarise possibly the reason in one well-used phrase. If you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And none of us ladies are on the menu, I'll tell you that. I'm sure we've all come across examples of policies, services or funding decisions that have been made without thought of how they will impact on women. We've got many examples of that. And my government is clear that that's absolutely unacceptable. And you know what? I get to drive that through the whole of government. So I find it unacceptable. The First Minister finds it unacceptable. The Cabinet finds it unacceptable. All of our MSPs find it unacceptable. And we're going to make sure we can change that, that women are considered at every step in our policy making process. Why do we think the lives of women and girls in Scotland should be better? Why should we not add additional barriers of deprivation to them? Because we can see the result here today. Motivated, inspiring, absolutely fantastic women who are involved in their communities, involved in their local politics, changing things, changing the culture. That's why that's incredibly important. And it's why our First Minister, when she came into power, that 50% of her cabinet and ministerial team are women. That changed the complexion of cabinet meetings and ministerial meetings. And that's why we support women 50-50. I was delighted to be part of the steering group of some amazing inspirational women, including Allison, on Women 50-50 campaign. And I commend Tala and her drive and determination to make sure that works. But I'm not going to tell you much more about that because she's going to tell you, and she's better at it than me. As chair of the Equality and Human Rights Committee, I got to take forward the government's plans for gender representation in public boards. As Minister in Government, I got to sign those regulations. It was one of the first regulations I signed as Minister. As Minister in Government just a few weeks ago, I got to commend the fact that we have reached 50-50 in our public boards in Scotland 2 years ahead of schedule. That's something to be proud of. But what it proves is that when we have the will, there is always a way. And we have legislated so that cannot now roll back to below 50-50. But we could make it 51. Yeah. But that's why we continue to make the case to the UK Government that they should legislate for local and national candidate quotas for all parties. Talak's cheering when I say that, by the 2021 election, and give Scottish Parliament the power to do that. And that's why it matters. It matters because when we have the will, we can make a change. But when we have the legislative power, we can reinforce that change and put that down in law. It says a wee bit here to talk about my journey into politics. I was just a mad feminist activist when I was about 14 years old when I realised, growing up in the East End of Glasgow, that boys got it better than girls. You know, and I thought, well, how can I change that? So I get involved in a profession in social work. I get involved in the trade union movement. I get involved in feminist and peace activism. I get involved in all of these things. I stood for my community council. 5 women stood and we swept the board. We swept all the men away on a community council, which we thought was a huge achievement. In 2006, I was at party conference up in Inverness, and I was in having a cup of tea during the break, and these 2 women sidled up next to me. They're like, next year, you should stand for the Scottish Parliament. And I was a national organiser for the party at the time, thinking, no, that's not for me. That's not for the likes of me. And folk used to say that to you. You'll all have heard it. That's not for you, hen. Politics isn't for you. I'm happy in the background, organising stuff, and these 2 women were insistent. So I went, right, I'll go and get vetted, but I'll no pass. And I passed. And then I'll not get selected for a constituency, and I got selected for a constituency. Those 2 women were Fiona Hislop and Nicola Sturgeon. And the other woman who has given me the most amazing and sometimes quite frank advice and support when I need it is a presiding officer, Linda Fabiani. So women need to build other women up. You need to give them the confidence, tell them what they're good at, also tell them that maybe you need to fix this bit or do that or change that or maybe change your approach to a few things. I'm pretty brash. I just get stuck in sometimes, and Linda's like, maybe just taking a wee step back, and she was right. You know, and she was right, and you learn from other women, but it's about building each other up and taking that, you know, to the next level. Who's a big girly swat? I'm a proud big girly swat, because that is not an insult. That should be treated with positivity, and anybody that treats it as an insult is an idiot. Also, a big girl's blouse. I've filled quite a lot of big girls' blouses in my years. But they're usually filled with a big girl who's got something to say. So don't ever be put off by someone who's calling you a big girl's blouse either. So you just look at a couple of examples over the past few days of the way negativity can be used to drag people down. We should turn that around and use that as positivity to lift each other up. And I seen a tweet this morning from a sitting MP suggesting that people shouldn't vote for a former MP because they were inferior. That former MP was a woman. I'm sorry, I don't care what party they're in, but you don't talk about women in that way, that women are inferior, because they're not. So let's take that positivity and change it. And one of my favourite quotes is from Madeleine Albright, who said there was a warm place in hell. You all know this quote, don't you, for women that don't lift up other women. There's a warm place in hell for men who use negative points like that to bring people down. A very, very warm place in hell, and I think we should be lighting the fire. So the population of Scotland's census in 2011 estimated that it was 5. I'm not even going to get that right. 51.5% of Scottish population were women, and yet women continue to be underrepresented in public, civic and political life at all levels, including senior levels. And women make up just 35% of members of Parliament, we've heard, and 29% of the House of Commons. 24% of local government councillors in Scotland are women. That's just not good enough. And there are fewer women MSPs in this place today than there was in 1999. So we've got work to do. You've all got work to do. We all have work to do. And internationally, the picture isn't much better. 24.3% of all the national parliamentarians are women as of February 2019, a very slow increase from 11.3% in 1995. Not quick enough. As of June 2019, 11 women are serving heads of state and 12 are serving as head of government. Still not good enough, but good on them. Rwanda has the highest number of women parliamentarians worldwide, where women have won 61.3% of seats in the lower house. I think that's a target we should all aspire to. What do you think? And globally, there are 27 states. Globally, there are 27 states in which women account for less than 10% of their parliamentarians in single and lower houses as of February 2019, including 3 chambers with no women at all. And we worry about us being dragged back to some of the tough times for women when you see some of the rhetoric from certain world leaders around the globe right now. You know, we've not just got work to do, but we've got to maintain and sustain what we already have and build on that as well. But I'm absolutely clear when it comes to human rights, gender equality will never be fully achieved until we have a gender-balanced representation in all of our politics. The UN says that gender inequality is the biggest issue undermining human rights across the globe today. This is for all nations, but in Scotland we take that aspiration very, very seriously. Human rights are inherent and inalienable. They belong to each one of us equally, irrespective of our background, race, gender or other characteristics. They're also interrelated and interdependent. That means that the failure to realise even one person's human rights can prevent or hinder the realisation of other rights. Conversely, work to protect, respect and fulfil human rights in one area in a person's life, for example, housing or fair work, can have a positive impact on other areas of life, for example, health and education. Can I just welcome the First Minister's announcement in the programme for government this week on a women's health initiative? I think we'll all find, if you've read Caroline Criado Perez's book over the summer, you'll know how important that is, and that's a great initiative. And I would ask you all to have a look at that and how you can maybe contribute. But that's why we seek to embed equality, dignity and respect in everything we do in this place, taking action to secure progressive implementation of all human rights so that everyone in Scotland can live a life of human dignity. That's my job in government as well. I get to stick my nose in everybody's portfolio to make sure that they're embedding human rights and equality into everything they do. In Scotland, the human rights are protected through the Scotland Act and the Human Rights Act. All legislation passed in this place has to comply with ECHR, which is a worry because we might lose that post that bad B word, which I'm not going to say today. You know the word I'm talking about.
Could you come to a close, please,
Yeah, I am. I'm just about finished, Presiding Officer. Sorry, I am just about finished. As the Scottish Minister, I have responsibility under the Scottish Ministerial Code to comply with the law, including international law and treaty obligations. The Scottish Government actively engages with the United Nations and other organisations. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW, is one of the 7 core United Nations principles. We're looking to embed that into everything we do. We're also promoting and defending human rights in our own country and around the world. And that's why this year, through our National Performance Framework, we made the protection of human rights one of Scotland's key national outcomes. And that makes it very important. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I'd like to end my remarks with another famous quote. I quite like famous quotes because I like women that say powerful things. And there's one. If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all. That was Hillary Clinton at the UN's 4th World Conference in Beijing. But she also said, let's us not forget that among those rights are the right to speak freely and the right to be heard. I am hoping you are going to be heard in this chamber today, heard across chambers across the whole of Scotland in councils, in community councils, and whatever representation you take forward in this Parliament and that Parliament down the road. I want to hear your voices loud and clear. This is your place. Your voice will be heard.
Thank you very much, Christina. Now, knowing Christina as well as I do, she could have gone on for another hour. And she didn't have time. I know she wished to apologise to you for the fact she's got to leave quite soon. She didn't have time to say that. And she's leaving to do loads of constituency work back in Hamilton. And that's the other part of politics. And it has been said that politics is all local. And the constituency work is the most important part of all. I'd now like to introduce our final speaker, Talat Yaqub, the chair and co-founder of the Women 50/50 campaign. It works across political parties in a national effort to increase representation of women at all levels of elected office across the country. Talat is currently a member of the Board of Directors for Engender and the Director of Equate Scotland. Talat, please.
I know it's already been said, but what a bloody brilliant looking Parliament. I mean, it's overwhelming standing here. It's quite nerve-wracking, but at the same time, there's so much warmth in being in front of you all. So thank you for the introduction, Deputy Presiding Officer. Thank you to Lee and Hannah and Patricia and the YWCA Scotland for inviting me along to speak today about something that I care passionately about. And for those of you who have met me in the audience, it's pretty much the only thing I talk about. My family have stopped coming to dinner. And that is women's representation across Scotland. I'm a feminist. I'm an unapologetic feminist. I'm an equalities activist, and I'm chair and co-founder of the Women 50/50 campaign. Many of you here I've had a chance to meet, but for those of you who don't know about Women 50/50, you can say sorry later. But for those of you who don't know about Women 50/50, we are the national campaign for women's representation and to have 50% at least across our councils and our Parliament. I want to tell you a little bit about the origins of Women 50/50. We are 5 years old as of next week. If anybody would like to buy me cake, that is acceptable. We will be 5 years old next week. And we started around the Scottish independence referendum in 2014 when a group of us who were on either side of the movement, of the decision in the referendum, came together and wanted to do something around women's equality with the heightened level of political interest and excitement and enthusiasm and the historic turnout we had at the referendum. We wanted to make more of that, and we wanted to channel it into women and girls. And we thought, well, what is it that we're going to do? How are we going to do that? How are we going to shine a light on the issues of women? We could talk about women's occupational segregation, the fact that they're locked into low-paid and precarious work. We could talk about the lack of women in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We could talk about violence against women. We could talk about street harassment. We could talk about sexual harassment. All of us were part of all of these different campaigns and groups and thinking in lots of different ways. And we thought, should we come together to shine a light on all of these excellent things that are being pursued by equalities organisations, women's organisations and feminists? And then we thought, who are all of these organisations and all of these groups trying to influence? They're all trying to influence the same group of people, whether that's at their local council level or at the Scottish Parliament. And there's a fundamental issue with the very people they are trying to influence. They do not look like Scotland. So therein lies the problem. And therein was created Women 50/50. We stand on the shoulders of a sisterhood that came before us, though. There was a 50/50 campaign right at the beginning of devolution of the Scottish Parliament. In 1999, there was a push by trade union women to get 50% representation in here. And they succeeded to an extent. We had the highest number of parliamentarians elected in 1999 in comparison to Westminster. But as Christina mentioned, progress isn't linear. It was meant to increase after every parliamentary election. It didn't. We had the heights of 40% women in this chamber in 2007. Right now, it's 36%. What that reveals is, if you don't campaign, if you don't continuously have your foot on the gas, and you take your foot off the pedal and don't hold people to account, you don't just stand still, you risk rolling back. And for women and girls in Scotland, we cannot risk rolling back. We only need to look at politics right now to see what can happen and the risk to rolling back into a darker, negative politics. Which is why I'm particularly inspired to be here today, because I don't know about you, but I need this. I need to be in a room of women who want to create change, who don't accept the status quo, who say this isn't good enough, I'm taking a stand and it's going to change for the better, because politics in Scotland, in the UK, globally, needs to become a better place. So the Women 50-50 campaign was born, and I'm delighted that 4 out of 5 parties have supported it. And as a consequence of this campaign, we had the public boards legislation. As a consequence of this campaign, we have had 4 out of 5 parties field 50% women candidates, and that's brilliant, but it's not enough, because voluntary measures happen if parties at the time feel like taking forward women's equality. I want legislative change so that they don't really have much of an option about whether they want to take forward women's equality. I'm quite okay with forcing that hand. We want to create change because the decision makers matter. Whether we are creating influence on women's policy around childcare, and I fundamentally believe if we had had women having equal representation and equal say in decision making from the start of our democracies, childcare and caring responsibilities would be equally shared, and childcare would be an economic priority. Because when women are around the decision-making tables, there is lived experience around that decision-making tables, and better decisions are made. It's as simple as that. Diversity makes for better decisions. We only need to look at the fact that austerity has impacted women more disproportionately. According to Engender, 80% of austerity measures have come out of women's pockets. And you have to think, well, if women were around the decision-making table, if women had more of a say in how we created politics, would that be the case? Or would there be a voice saying, that doesn't work for me, that won't work for the women I represent? So we want to change the face of politics. But we don't want to change it just for the women who are already here. I am delighted that this Parliament looks so diverse today. I'm delighted that there are women of colour in this Parliament. I'm delighted there are disabled women in this Parliament. I'm delighted there are working class women in this Parliament, that there are LGBT women in this Parliament, because women are not a homogenous group. The reality is that in the 20 years of devolution, a woman of colour has never been elected to one of these seats. Okay? A woman who looks like me has never been elected to one of these seats. But often, women of colour, disabled women, working class women are at the sharpest end of policy making. So they have to be in this room. They have to be elected. It is our democratic responsibility, if we want to create an open, participative Scotland, to tackle every and all barrier in the way for the women who are furthest away to access to politics, power and opportunity to participate in our politics. Often they're called the communities that are hardest to reach. No, they're the communities that are the easiest to ignore, but no longer. We want diverse... I want to see diverse women here. I want to see them having a stake in politics in Scotland. And we believe we can do this through one part of the jigsaw puzzle, which is candidate quotas. That means every political party would have to field 50% women candidates, and preferably in winnable seats. They're not there as paper candidates, winnable seats. Not that I'm making any points to anybody who's involved in a political party right now, but feel free to take that line home. But legislated candidate quotas are there to force the hand of change. But what it's really about, and what Women 50/50 is trying to create, is political culture change. Because we desperately need political culture change. I want parties to have to find, support, invest, and prioritise women. That's the point of having to go and find 50% women candidates. You have to change how you do things right now because it hasn't been working for women. That's the purpose, to force your hand. Culture change needs to be transformed. What Women 50/50 wants to see is sexism stamped out of politics, is racism and bigotry stamped out of politics. It wants to see caring responsibilities understood and the disproportionate level of caring that women have to do, and therefore create a different kind of system in politics. Because a woman who has caring responsibilities, like I do, whether it's somebody who is unwell, whether it's elderly, whether it is a child, also can't be the person who takes the late night meetings and goes to the bar after work and makes the decisions that are actually being made. That's not how politics is meant to work. So the culture has to change too, and that's something that I'm passionate about. So we want them to stamp out sexism, we want them to take caring responsibilities seriously, invest in them and transform how we do politics. And I want a media that is interested in scrutinising the policies and positions of women, not their shoes or their bodies. I want the voices of women centred, and I want those to be the voices of every woman, not a homogenous group. It's not just those who are middle class, white, university educated and have access to power already. Yes, you deserve to be in politics, but there are women behind you who are so many steps behind, and if we're going to do it properly, it's your responsibility to look behind you and make way. On a personal level, although this isn't part of any of the paragraphs that you'll see on the Women 50/50 website, on a personal level, I want women in positions of power, but I want feminists in positions of power. I want to see women who have women's interests at heart, who want to transform politics, who want to create policies that make lives better for women. So get through the door and then wear your feminist badge with pride, I guess, is what I'm saying, unapologetically. I want to leave you with 3 myths that I get asked about when anybody, really what I'm saying is when anybody tweets the campaign. And you can tell I'm getting more fatigued and tired by these tweets because my replies are becoming more passive-aggressive. I usually just send an eye-rolling GIF now. That's where I'm at with the campaign. But there's three myths that get thrown at me. One is, well, maybe women just aren't interested in politics. Okay. I'd like you to try and take a photo of today and just tweet that out whenever you get a chance. Because women are interested in politics. It's the system that has told them it's not for them. It is the system that has pushed them away. The second is that women don't need quotas. Quotas are something that delegitimizes politics. It lowers the standard of politics. Well, aside from that being lazy nonsense, it's also utterly inaccurate because all the evidence tells us that when we have quotas, the average merit of everybody, regardless of gender, increases because parliamentarians feel the need to step up their game. And when you're making decisions about healthcare, justice, environment, transport, education, yeah, you're going to up your game. So if quotas are helping that, bring them on. And the last one is the idea that we currently operate in a meritocracy. Now, I'm not going to give you examples as to why that might not be the case, but I think you know them. If we operated on meritocracy, what we're saying is that men and their overrepresentation of men is some innate natural thing. That men are just naturally more capable, more competent, more interested in politics. Again, I will not give you examples. However, If that's the case, I've yet to find the gene that tells me that there is an innate ability in politics. Meritocracy, when women are grossly underrepresented, is a myth. And quotas do not prevent merit, they promote merit. And meritocracy is what we are trying to create, an open, participative democracy. Quotas are a plaster to change the issue that we have now. But if we are creating a more equal society, they're not needed in the future. But we don't have that equal society now, hence why we need quotas. So if anybody questions you about why you're here, about why there's only women in the room, about why we need quotas, hopefully I've given you some arguments to rebuttal. Anybody sees me sending an eye-rolling gif and you want to go ahead and participate in Twitter and take that away from me, you can. I am tired. It's been 5 years. So you go ahead and participate in that. I would thoroughly enjoy it. I'll leave you with just a vote of thanks, really, to say thank you for being here, for caring about women's participation. I want to leave you knowing that what you need to do and what we need to do is think about those women who are furthest away from access to power and politics. I want to thank you for participating in this. I hope you have an inspiring day. I've already been inspired. I hope you continue to participate beyond today, and I hope to see your names on a ballot paper in a winnable seat sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tala. I have to say it's a long time since I sat in this chair and heard such a welcome for two speakers in the chamber. So, we're now going to move on to the panel discussion. So can I invite our panellists to please join me in the well of the chamber? She's instantly took my seat. There's one for the future. Right, I'm pleased to hear that the microphone attached to my underwear is working. So, here in the panel, and shortly to answer your questions, we have Allison Johnson, MSP, Kay Marie Hughes, Councillor Alison Everson, and Katie Dundas, MSYP. Now, they're all going to give us a presentation answering some initial questions about how they got here. If you would like to ask any of our panellists a question, could I ask you to please submit your questions in the Facebook Live comment section or email sws2019@parliament.scot. There's also pen and paper lying around across all the desks. So if you would like or prefer to write down a question, please do so. Stick your hand up in the air, someone will collect it and bring them down to me. Is that all clear? Is everybody okay with that? Yeah? Good. And we'll also be getting questions sent in from the 4 hubs. So I'm now going to ask each member of the panel to speak for 5 minutes, answering the very basic questions of their positions, why should women look to politics, and key advice, which I hope is forthcoming. So I'm going to begin with Kay Marie Hughes.
Thank you. So I am a community councillor at the ward of Burnfoot. Burnfoot is an area of huge deprivation. It's one of the areas where we have one of the largest housing estates in Scotland, and we have a very high child poverty rate, high levels of unemployment. But we also have a fantastic sense of community in Burnfoot. We have lots of positives. We have the Burnfoot Hub, which runs family days, they run work experience days. We have people like the Healthy Living Network, Community Learning Development, and the Burnfoot Growing Together, which gets people into the community to grow their own vegetables, and they also feed the community by having free food stands as well. I suppose one of the things that got me into the Burnfoot Community Council was my experience working in social work and in education, where I visited families in the home and saw the rough end of what was happening and the things that families had to put up with in the poverty and deprivation. and I decided the only way to make a difference was to get involved. I'm also a trade unionist, very passionate about that, and I also, as a gay woman, very passionate about equalities and do lots of work in the LGBT community. The question was asked, why should we stand? Well, us women, we have an awful lot to offer to our communities. We have fantastic skills of organisation. We all run households and have families. I think one of the things I need to say is that sometimes as women we need to be selfish, because we hear things like, you should be at home looking after your family. You know, how are you going to put a meal on the table because you're busy going to a meeting? So my idea is, let them have a takeaway once a week. You know, get yourself out there and get yourself doing things for your community. The most rewarding things are the activities that we have. We have Burnfoot Carnival. I'm working at the moment of creating a remembrance garden. One of the other things that I did was the Equal Marriage March. And I was very lucky that my children got to be the poster boys in some of the campaigns when they held up signs outside saying, let my mummy marry. The changes in the community are really positive. We've seen crime levels come down and we've seen more people engage in activities. We also have our challenges. I don't know if anybody knows an awful lot about the Scottish borders, but one of our main things is it's I-been. And that's a case of it's always been that way, why change it? So always we're battling change. We also have the common ridings. We have an incident in the common ridings that women haven't been allowed to take place, and it's only in the last 2 years that some very brave women have took the steps to get involved, to go to the hut and drink with women, drink with other men. And often they've faced criticism, they've faced harassment, but they're standing there and they're making things equal. I suppose the other challenging thing is time management. It's really hard to fit everything in that you want to do, and you may be passionate, and sometimes you just got to get yourself out there and do it. My key advice is that we have a lot to give, and sometimes we want to make huge changes, but the only way we can do that is by taking small steps. And my other advice is use legislation. There's things like equality impact assessments. Now, if it wasn't for those, women wouldn't have had a chance to ride at the common riding. So it's good that although we've got the legislation and we're able to fight and use that legislation to get what we want, it's also the fact that we go out and we do it as well. And I suppose my other thing is a call to action. And your gender does not qualify your worth. And that's a really important message to get out to everybody. We are strong, we're leaders, and it's our time to stand. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kay Marie. Can I now invite Councillor Allison Everson?
Thank you very much. And it really is a great picture in front of me today, looking out, as I am, at all the women in the chamber. And to know that there's even more women in the hubs around Scotland, it's absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. I'm a councillor in Aberdeenshire, where I was first elected in 2012. Before that, I was a teacher, and I was thinking about all the things in education that I thought weren't quite right. Do I sit and moan about things, complain about things, get grumpy about things, or do I get in and try and do something, make something different? I was first elected in 2012 and I entered a council where currently only a third of our councillors are women. We need to work together to change that. I'm also now president of the Scottish Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, or COSLA, a membership organisation that includes all 32 of Scotland's councils. We are the voice of local government in Scotland, which, along with the Scottish Government and the UK Government, is one of the spheres of government in our country. My work as a councillor obviously carries on and varies from day to day. It's a very, very diverse job for anyone thinking of taking it on. I obviously represent my ward, my local ward, to ensure that decisions made locally benefit local people. I'm involved in developing council policy and setting the council budget, scrutinising local decisions and public bodies and holding them to account. Men account for 71% of councillors, but 49% of our communities. Our council chambers, as we all know, are dominated by men. Our communities are not. How can councillors make really effective, inclusive decisions on behalf of their communities if councils do not reflect the composition of those communities. Until more women stand, they can't. Women representatives best understand the issues impacting on women's social and economic lives. Issues like period poverty and the menopause have gained airtime recently and huge advances have been seen, but only when women politicians pushed those issues forward. More women standing could bring a female perspective to a whole wide range of issues. Let's bring about change so that appeals committees considering employment issues are not composed of men, that planning committees discussing arrangements for local settlements are not all male. Let's ensure that all local decision-making that affects women includes women. Women being seen as equal to men in council and other prominent positions will also help to counter violence against women. We know that harassment, abuse, and violence against women is linked to the unequal distribution of political power. Let's change that. My most challenging task as a councillor, making difficult budget decisions in the light of reducing council budgets and ensuring that that impact does not unfairly fall on particular groups of people within our communities, like women. My most rewarding, despite facing opposition, preparing a case for my council to welcome Syrian refugees into our communities and proposing a motion at full council to do this, winning acceptance across the chamber. Since that day, Aberdeenshire has not only provided homes for many Syrian families, but officers have developed local connections so that the new Scots have become valued members of our communities. I am proud of what we have achieved together on this issue. If you are looking to stand for local government, which I would encourage you really strongly to do, my key advice is this: you can. Persist. You are not alone. Though the majority of councillors are currently male, and this can be intimidating, the picture is indeed changing. Women who have gone before you are there to hold out a hand to you and provide support. Many of us see our role as paving the way for other women. We are creating the cross-party networks that will be there to help you if things seem tough. We are developing ideas which are innovative in local government, such as job sharing and parental leave. We are working to challenge the assumptions of male power in the way that meetings are organised and senior roles are distributed. The more of us there are bringing such fundamental issues to the fore, the more we will be able to encourage even more women to stand and to make a difference for the communities we serve. Together, we are stronger. If you are thinking of standing, take that step. If you can be a strong shoulder for another woman to stand, be that shoulder. If you can fix things in your local party so meetings are held at times women can attend, do that. If you can ensure your councillor hears women's voices in your area, do that. The contribution of all of us is needed. We can all work together to promote the difference that women are making, to share views of positive role models and provide an alternative to the negative images of women that so often fill our media. Tell her story. Encourage women around you. Help demonstrate that they can make a positive difference, that you can make a positive difference. Take hands across the chamber and commit to doing this thing together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Now, Katie Dundas is a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament. Please, Katie.
Thank you. I represent Skyla Cabot in Badenoch as a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament, which is the democratically elected voice of Scotland's young people. Every 2 years, we elect MSIPs from ages 14 to 25 to represent Scottish parliamentary constituencies, but also national voluntary organisations such as Girl Guiding and Who Cares Scotland. This is my third year in the organisation, having first been elected in 2017 at the age of 14. I enjoyed my first term so much, and I felt like I still had more to learn and gain from being an MSIP, so I decided to stand back again in our elections earlier this year. I was successful, and at our AGM back in June, I was also elected to SIP's board as a trustee, where I'm responsible for the youth engagement and development portfolio. SIP operates as a charity, which is one day older than the Scottish Parliament, a fact we like to remind our little sister of quite regularly. Our board is elected by our members, just like any other charity. What makes us unique, however, is the fact that this board is entirely young people, making us fully youth-led. I'm honoured and excited to hold these roles, and I found it a really valuable learning experience so far. Young women should stand as a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament because it's a really empowering place to be a young woman. We're a truly inclusive organisation with over 54% of our members identifying as female, and I'm proud to say that we also have a gender-balanced board. As an MSIP, you would find yourself surrounded by like-minded, passionate young women who are a genuine joy to work with. As we're a rights-based organisation, in SIP we are passionate about equality and making sure women's voices are heard. Through holding policy that directly benefits many young women, such as our continued support in ending period poverty, to taking part in projects and events just like this one today, we will always stand up for young women in Scotland. For that reason, I think it's absolutely crucial that young women stand to be MSIPs, because we're lucky to be such a diverse and equal organisation. So it's important that we continue to set a precedent for other organisations to follow who perhaps aren't quite as diverse. I think the most challenging thing about my time in SIP so far has been juggling it with all my other responsibilities. That's something somewhat unique to MSIPs. We're all volunteers. Most of us are in school, university, or college, and many of us have a job on top of that, as well as other commitments which can be really difficult to balance. For example, I sat my National 5 and higher exams over the past 2 years, and I'm currently studying towards advanced hires. However, the rewarding experiences and opportunities that I've had make that all worth it. From debating in the House of Commons with the UK Youth Parliament last year, to travelling across the country for meetings, to making some amazing friends, I've pushed myself more than I ever have before and developed a lot as a person. Additionally, the knowledge I've gained and things I've learned about our political society couldn't have been gained anywhere else, and have sparked a desire in me to continue learning about this and furthering young people's voices. Another massively rewarding thing about my time in office as an MSIP was our 2017 Right Here, Right Now campaign, which has recently seen success as the Scottish Government committed to incorporating the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child into Scots law. That was the first SIP campaign I took part in, and I'm still so proud that all of our hard work had such a profound impact on the lives of Scotland's children and young people. I think the best piece of advice I could give to any young woman today considering standing for SIP is to not hold yourself back. It can be easy to think that such a role isn't for you, or maybe you don't think that you're suited for it, or you don't think you have the skills for it. However, I can promise you that if you just give it a go, you'll probably end up surprising yourself and learning a lot from some invaluable experiences and opportunities. I don't have any regrets, and I know I wouldn't be anywhere near as confident, capable, or engaged as I am now if I hadn't stayed to be an MSIP. Although it can be daunting, you'll also find a really strong support network among the organisation, from SIP's wonderful staff team to your local youth workers to fellow MSIPs there to lift you up when times are difficult. Also, it's important to remember that your opinions and thoughts are valid. Stand your ground. If you believe in something, be loud and proud about it and speak out, get involved, and have your say. It's crucial that young women should be heard in today's society, and standing to be an MSIP is a really proactive way of achieving that. My call to action for all women today is to support and uplift each other. In such a frosty political climate, it can be easy to tear people down. However, it's important that we don't resort to that. Women have struggled for generations to be heard. Just 101 years ago, some of us were only able to vote for the first time, after a huge fight for that right. We owe it to those women from so long ago to keep working together to reach equality. You don't have to stand for election to do this. You simply have to be encouraging to women around you and supportive of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Now, before I move on to Alison Johnson, I'm supposed to notice everything when I'm sitting in the chair. And I've noticed that there's a big crack in that glass that Alison's drinking her water from. So, please. I don't want to have any industrial accidents on my watch. So, don't touch it. Okay? Right. Alison Johnson, member of the Scottish Parliament for the Green Party.
Thank you, Linda. What a caring presiding officer we have today. I'm Allison Johnston. I'm an MSP and I represent Lothian region. I've done that since 2011. Prior to that, I was a councillor in City of Edinburgh Councillor for 5 years. And you know, we've been asked a series of questions that we have to try and share our responses with you today, and the first is, why should women stand for election? Well, I think you've already heard why we should stand. The fact that 80% of the welfare cuts have hit our pockets tells you all you need to know. You know, the fact that we're not out on the streets campaigning about that really loudly just tells you that we're really busy doing all the other tasks that are taken for granted all the unpaid care, all our childcare, all that unpaid work. Largely women do that. It's really important that you do get involved. As a councillor and as an MSP, when schools are being closed, when nurses are being closed, when there's cuts to rape crisis centres, surgeries are full of women. And then I come into this chamber or the council chamber, who's voting? Who's making the speeches largely? Who's taking the decisions? You know, we have to change this. It is really important. There's a different vibe in this chamber today because it's full of women. We've been asked to discuss what we found most challenging. It is challenging being involved in politics. You challenge yourself. I left school when I was 16. I didn't come from a background where I'd been part of a debating society. I didn't, I engaged in politics. I'd watch TV, I'd shout at the TV, I'd go along and always vote. My family always voted. They were engaged in that way. But honestly, if you'd said to one of my teachers, one day you'll find yourself in the Scottish Parliament, no, really wouldn't have said boo to a goose. When I first spoke in the City of Edinburgh Council chambers, I felt like my knees were going to, knock the desk over. And one thing that I will always remember from my first experience in that city chambers was that a prominent, experienced male councillor referred to a prominent, experienced woman councillor as a fishwife. But do you know what was even worse? No, I didn't hear nobody batted an eyelid. I was like, this is the norm. And even last week in this chamber, there was reference to the fact that a woman might have actually touched up her hair cosmetically, with a non-natural colour. So we've got a way to go. We really do have a way to go. So there are challenges. I think social media in some ways has made life more challenging. There's a lot of vitriol, there's a lot of abuse out there, but there's a lot of support too. And I would say that I got involved because I was very well supported by a couple of women in particular when I joined my party. When it was suggested we were looking for a candidate, they'd say, what about you? And I was like, you're absolutely joking. I don't know these policies in and out. I convinced myself as well at that point that I needed to know everything about everything. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's just you don't, and nobody does, and they never will. So you need to know what you need to know for that day. So prep is key, and being surrounded by good people who give you the confidence to debate, and I don't know why this comes to mind, but electricity market reform, for example. We're not going to know everything. We've got our own passions, we've got our own experiences. There's things we know a lot about. There's things we don't know so much about, but that's one of the great privileges of this role. I'm also privileged, too, to be one of the co-founders of the Women 50/50 campaign. I am absolutely determined we need positive discrimination. I have heard male colleagues in this chamber, who are absolutely convinced that, yeah, they're all here on merit. There is a very long way to go, and that, we don't just need 50% of candidates to be women. They absolutely have to be in winnable seats. I don't think that having 50% of candidates women is enough. I want 50% at least of those elected to be women. And if that isn't happening, then you need to go back to your parties and ask them why. Why did that not happen? And I'm, perfectly happy, and I'm having that discussion with my own party colleagues at the moment. So my call to action, please do get involved. Progress isn't linear. It has stalled. It's stalled big time, and we're seeing the repercussions and the ripples across the globe. Some of what we're seeing at the moment is truly horrifying because we have people who are not there on merit, who do not deserve to be there, and we could do a far better job. So please get yourself involved. I would just say finally, if I can do it, you can do it, and happy to help any woman who wants to in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alison. I've started to get questions coming in now. As usual, we're behind time. We've got about 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to be quite prescriptive here, and I might just ask specific panel members different questions so that we can get through. For example, the first one I have is actually a question for Councillor Alison Everson. It's from a fellow councillor.
A lot of them.
From Councillor Julie Mackenzie. And she says, what would Alison like to see councils doing to promote better representation of women in local politics?
I think the first thing is events like today and the hubs happening across Scotland are really, really important to do that. I think councils as well need to make themselves more open to the barriers that might face women if they do stand, and start considering what they could do to overcome those barriers. We're doing a lot of work on that at COSLA ourselves at the moment, thinking about the issues that might prevent women from standing and working on guidelines to share with our councils about how they can remove those barriers. Yes, there are things like the times of meetings, yes, there are things like childcare, but there are also practical things like the images in council chambers. When you go in and you see pictures of men everywhere and not women. In fact, this week I was at Cardiff City Council in Wales, and I was struck by a statue of Boudica, the warrior who led women and men against the Roman invasion in AD 51 or whenever. And I was struck by this statue. I shouldn't have been. Images like that in our council chambers should be far normal to see women in that kind of position. So at COSLA, we're doing our bit to develop guidelines to support councils, and it's really, we need to ask them to do the same thing. Look at the barriers locally, talk to the women councillors that already exist in your area, share their views, and try and work together cross-party in the council area to overcome them.
Thank you, Alison. Now, I've got two questions I'm going to link together here and ask you all to address, with fairly short responses, although this is a huge subject, I have to say. The first one's from Cass, that's come in Facebook, and she says, we need to encourage disabled women and non-binary people to stand, but how do we challenge the tropes and the discrimination that we face within our own parties and from society? Of course, we need to be making laws and policy, but the barriers are really high. And to add to that, Morag, by email, has asked, does anyone know how many disabled women are currently standing in Scotland at Parliament and locally? Alison.
Not enough, certainly. Absolutely not enough. And I think that one thing, the Women 50-50 campaign is determined to address, this is just not about women. This Parliament needs to look like the people of Scotland, and it doesn't. And even if we have 50-50 gender representation, that's only the first step. I feel, as a member of the Scottish Green Party, we can and should do more. We've been calling out a lot. We're running up to our Holyrood 2021 selection at the moment, and we've been making a real effort to ask non-binary people, disabled people to stand. We've been offering to help, to mentor in any way we can. Some of it, we have so many buildings that still remain inaccessible. So much of politics as well. One of the things that I found frustrating, and I've heard this from women who are single parents, for example, is the barriers you don't think about. One woman who would have made an absolutely fabulous candidate said to me, I can't go on to the pub after the local party meetings. I've got to get back to free my babysitter. It's that sort of stuff. It's all the informal stuff. So how much more challenging is that kind of thing for disabled people? So I really do think when we're considering quotas, we need to go further. We need to absolutely insist that there is a appropriate proportion of people who are disabled, who are non-binary. We need to go as far as we possibly can. I think cultural change and legislative change often go hand in hand.
Kay Marie.
I'll just give an example of something we did in the Community Council. We have a festival every year, and as part of that we have, the Portaloos. Some of the Community Council had decided that they would put male and female stickers on the Portaloos because the men made an awful mess and the women used to complain. Through doing all the work with Equalities, I was able to suggest that, that we maybe didn't do that, or if we were to do that, then we would have some gender-neutral toilets as part of that. Also making sure that all our meetings are accessible to everyone, making sure that all the events that we do are accessible to everyone. I think it's having that kind of acceptance that when they see that our events have taken those things into consideration, that they know that they'll be welcome along to the community councils and welcome into it that way.
Katie, give us the experience of the Youth Parliament and young people and how you do that.
We always try and make sure, in a similar way to how you were saying, that our events and settings are fully accessible for disabled people and women in particular in this context. In terms of going back to the question about non-binary, we work with, as I mentioned, we have MSIPs from volunteer organisations, and one of those volunteer organisations is LGBT Youth Scotland, so we kind of ask those MSIPs to try and champion those rights. But yeah, that kind of is my answer.
Okay, Alison, and can I perhaps ask you to comment? I've got a question in from Victoria by email saying that the number of elected members of Scottish Youth Parliament identifying as women is really impressive. So what can the Scottish Parliament, COSLA, local authorities learn from the Scottish Youth Parliament? And are they willing to? I did that bit myself.
I firmly believe that we need to learn from everyone we can learn from. We need to see what the Scottish Youth Parliament is doing, and we need to take lessons from them. I'm really pleased to see Inclusion Scotland here today with a stall in the garden lobby as well, and work with organisations like that to see how we can actually make everything as accessible to everybody and everyone as welcome as they can be. I said when I was talking earlier, we need to work together. I think that is the key to it. No one person, no one organisation has got all the answers. But together we can come up with some pretty good answers, and all of us in this room today have a good chance of doing that. So we do have to work to make sure that all sectors of our community, everyone, is represented in our council chambers, in our spheres of government across Scotland, and by working together we can achieve that.
Now, Alison Johnson raised the question about the social aspects that come into politics so much at party level and others. And, you know, the need so often for women to be the ones that have to get home for the babysitter, have to do other things. So I've got a couple of questions here that tie in with some of these difficulties. From the Argyll and Bute Hub, welcome, from Councillor Mary Jean Devon, who talks about the size of the geographic area that she has to cover. Argyll and Bute, absolutely huge. It's difficult to raise the profile of elected representatives at that level. The having to work extensive hours to cover that size award. Financially, basic salary for a councillor is $16,640. Does the panel think this is acceptable? And how can young people, young women, be expected to put themselves forward for that? I'm going to go straight to you in this one.
That is identifying many of the huge barriers we know exist and we're trying to work to overcome. I come from Aberdeenshire myself, where as a councillor, and I know the problem of huge rural areas. I mean, takes so long to travel from one area to another. If you are paying a childminder, if you are paying babysitters to look after your children, that really limits what you can do. And we need to try and work through a response to that. Now, a councillor's salary, basic salary, £17,000 a year. Not many people can live on that and work as a councillor as well. You know, we need to address that issue, and it's something we are raising as well. It's a basic barrier facing people standing as councillors. If we are going to address the diversity in our chambers, if we are going to make them more diverse and more people able to stand, we need to think carefully about issues like that. And I think a part of the problem is letting people know outside that that's how councillors are paid. I think people assume that councillors are getting the same salary as MSPs or MPs. It's not like that. And I think we need to spread that message as well and make it clear to people what we're doing. And people needing second jobs, people needing support childcare, well, yes, they are issues. They are currently barriers. We don't have the answers yet, but we're working towards them, and hopefully with our colleagues in the Scottish Parliament as well, we'll be able to come up with some solutions to that one. Councillor pay is not something we can set ourselves. We need to work with the Scottish Government in particular on that, and we intend to do so.
Well, that was a popular one, and there's a whole seminar waiting on the role of councillors and all of that. But if I can ask Kay Marie to perhaps address that, but also I've got a question from Anne on Facebook directly related to community councils. And Anne's saying that they've always met on a Tuesday, you know, never going to change that. She was elected to it, but she now works away on a Tuesday. So she can't be a member any longer because people won't change. What's your experience of community councils in that regard?
Yes, change is a big thing. The majority of our community councillors are retired members. And as I say, this thing of I-being, we have our meeting on a set day. It's very difficult, you know, to arrange to change those things. It's about, you know, having allies in there and speaking to people and saying, actually, you know, I can do a really good job. But we have to make allowances, and things like changing the venues as well. We are a big rural area. You know, when you move about, you know, you need to have different venues that people can come to that are accessible, and that, you know, people can change their work patterns and things to meet those things. Yes, we need to have change. We need to be flexible, and I think it is a really hard thing to do, but I think if we can get younger people involved, and certainly one of the things I said about, you know, the pay, the salaries, that is a big barrier to younger people. A lot of our councillors are retired members, you know, retired people that take, you know, they'll work their whole life, and especially the guys, they'll work their whole life, and then they get to retirement age and then think, oh, right, I'll just go and be a councillor now. And that seems to be what happens. So we need to, you know, bring those salaries up to allow younger people up and to get younger people more involved.
Alison Johnson, you've been both an MSP and a councillor. What's your take on this?
They're both very challenging, particularly when you are, if you have young children to look after and so on. It can be really difficult, and you cannot do it without a fair amount of pretty solid support. And even then, it can be incredibly difficult. So I think we need to get more flexible. Sometimes it's not even access to childcare. It's sometimes bearing in mind that there are things you actually want to do yourself. You know, you don't want to be in this chamber if your child's running in sports day. Do you know what I mean? You end up with your heart almost being torn in two sometimes as well. So I just think building in flexibility, a recognition that people are balancing a variety of roles. You know, you might have an elderly parent that you're looking after, and you might want to be there sometimes. So I think the more support we can provide, the better. I mean, childcare, why don't we have, there's a creche in this building, but for some people, you know, you can end up taking you're leaving an hour early in the morning to get your child's childcare, which you're then paying for that childcare. You're worrying if you're going to get back there at the end of the day. I'd just like to see far more institutions having childcare on this, you know, where they are. I went to visit North Edinburgh Childcare a while ago. They provide actually affordable childcare. You know, I think when I went to visit them, say the daily rate was £35, they were offering it for 19. But the young woman there couldn't access it because it was all full of professional people's children from out with the area. She wanted to study in her local college, but it was full, and she was attending the college, but she couldn't get her own child in there. So it's about making sure that institutions and places have that childcare on the spot. How much more relaxed would you be if you knew that you were all in the same building, like going to the same place? So there's a lot of basic things that I think we could be doing far better. I've probably focused on childcare there a bit, but yeah, and I know we're taking strides in the right direction in Scotland, but there's a lot more we can do. It's not just about childcare. Not everyone, you know, has that concern. It may be looking after elderly relatives, as I've said. They may have other caring responsibilities.
Katie, I've just had a question which follows on from that, from Hannah. Do you think there's a future where MSPs could job share? Because women are more likely to want to work part-time.
I think that potentially could be something in the future. It could be a really kind of interesting way to make Parliament more accessible to women, because it would mean that, you know, different people with different time commitments, or maybe, as you said, things that women want to do. If one woman had something that she wanted to go to, then their counterpart could cover. So I think that is a really proactive idea.
Yeah, worth looking at. Here's a big one. I'm going to loop them together again. We have, we've had Hannah, Vicky, and Emily by email and Facebook. And they're saying society's attitude towards politics and politicians is a significant barrier to women standing. What can we do to change that negative attitude? And Emily's asking, how can we combat the online abuse that women in particular face on social media? We may have started to develop coping mechanisms, but surely the responsibility shouldn't lie with the women who are using platforms to use their voice. Kay Marie.
I think it's about teaching our people to be well behaved and to have a moral compass. And I think what happens is we have this sort of group mentality. One person will start something off and then everybody else will join in. But I think it's really important when you see these things to stick up for other women and to put your piece in and say, no, actually, that's not right. I do think it's difficult. I think in local council, in government, you know, everything that goes wrong, you get the blame because you're the person that's at the front of it. So I don't think we'll wipe that out completely. But I think it's about education, and it starts in the home, it starts in schools, and it's about sort of giving people the knowledge and the tools to use social media in a positive way.
Alison. I think we all in this room and in the hubs and across Scotland, we can all make that difference ourselves. If all the current situation is the current culture and the current makeup of our parliaments and our spheres of government, if we all stand, we can all make a difference ourselves. We can develop the culture that we want to see in our political environment. So I think we've all got a role in that. Let's stand together, let's do it, let's talk about what we want, let's call out what we don't want. And that calling out, I think, is crucial. We shouldn't accept anything that we don't want to accept. We should call it out and say, that's an end to it. That's a way to make a difference. The social media, yes, it can be very tough. It is a place where people say things where they wouldn't say it in person. They wouldn't be brave enough to say it to someone's face, but they say it on social media. We need to call that out ourselves as well. We need to try and make sure that people know it's not acceptable. Don't be afraid to block people. Don't be afraid to get rid of it. But also, let's all support each other. You know, if people know, as politicians, people in the public eye, people know that you've got people around you who will support, who will be that shoulder for you when things get tough. That's an important part of it as well. And that can be done on a cross-party basis. We're not here as individuals. We're here together to make a difference.
Katie, I'm particularly interested in your take on this because, you know, we have heard reports of online bullying for people in your age group, etc. How do you feel about all this? What can we do about it?
I think similar to what you two were both saying is that we really need to stick up for each other and kind of stand up for each other and have a good support network. And just like you mentioned, across party lines, I think it's important to kind of not partake in that, even if maybe that person isn't from your party or shares your opinion, to just not play a part in that kind of bullying or trolling on the internet. I think also not giving these people a platform is a really important thing to do. I know whenever I get a kind of slightly dodgy response to a tweet or something maybe not very nice, I don't reply to it anymore. I don't kind of register it. I usually just block it or report it and leave it, because then it's not out there for people to see. So I definitely agree with that.
Alison, I'm happy for you to address that too, but there's another couple of questions come in that relate. Lillian has come in from Facebook asking whether there are any campaigns or programmes aimed at bringing awareness about human rights, that is women's rights, aimed at women in the community because of the cultural barriers that exist and the prejudice that exists. She talks about ageism, xenophobia and bigotry. And also, on much more specific question, Caroline from Stornoway is looking for advice about challenging inherently exclusive bodies, such as Freemasons and the Presbyterian Church, which only appoints male elders. Well, if you can answer these questions, Alison, if you can give us solutions to these questions.
As I said earlier, I now know that you don't need to know the answer to everything. These are ongoing challenges, aren't they? You know, and I think that question kicked off with, is social media now a barrier to women getting involved? And I've no doubt at all that, you know, being an elected member 20 years ago probably was, I think it was a more gentle environment because we didn't have the polarisation that social media causes. It's like people say one thing and then a lot of people are then hell-bent on maintaining that position, even if it becomes increasingly obvious that they should be shifting their views a little bit. So it does create this, you know, this camp and that camp, and never the two shall meet, which is very frustrating. It can obviously do brilliant things. You know, we've seen groups of thousands of young people outside, you know, protesting about the climate and the impact our behaviour is having on their future. So it can be used for great positive stuff. We can all encourage and share lots of good things with one another, but there's a lot of hate on there too. And some of what was being mentioned there, I mean, I think we're seeing the resurgence of the far right, the normalisation of hate speech in all its forms, whether it's, you know, LGBT hate, whether it's, you know, racism, the fact that we have men in power across the globe who are basically think that's just grand because it suits their purposes. These are all things that we do have to challenge. I do think we have to, I've got a wee tendency myself, I have to say, to think, oh, water off a duck's back, I'll just ignore it. And I need to get better at saying, no, actually call it out. I know what you're saying, it's difficult, isn't it? It's that balance of giving people a platform, because you think, why should I give them the sort of the end to all the people that might be following you on Twitter. So there's a balance to be struck, but I think a real zero tolerance. With regards to the specific groups that were mentioned there, yeah, I mean, we want to have an inclusive society, so we do have to look at, you know, where groups are being platformed, where they're being funded, why they are, you know, are they being given access to areas and people that they probably shouldn't be given access to. So I think these are ongoing discussions. I mean, Alison will know whether, you know, Councillor role too. I mean, we live in a society where free speech is rightly valued, but there is a balance to be struck when that starts to impact on other people's human rights and their ability to feel like a safe, valued member of the community.
I've got a couple of questions from in here, and there's one that follows on from this. I think it's an excellent question. So, how can we best educate young men about the problems women face? And it's from a teacher who's saying that male pupils deny that there is inequality. Now, can I just add a wee bit to that? Because the first programme that we did with the Young Women Lead programme, they decided for their topic was sexual harassment in schools. And they issued a wonderful report at the end of it that has been taken note of by John Swinney in his education brief, and it's been raised in Parliament. But can I say, as a feminist of a certain age, who always thought that things would get better, I was absolutely horrified at what was uncovered by the investigation that the Young Women League Committee did. Horrified at some of the findings. And it directly relates to what we're hearing here, where male pupils not only deny there is inequality, don't believe there is, but also girls who think that girl power means equality. So how do we educate young men about the problems that women face? And I'm going to put you on the spot here, Katie, as you know, one of the young women who I would imagine has seen this firsthand through school, etc.
I mean, I definitely agree with you that I have also been kind of very shocked in my recent years in school, because I mean, you look at where women were 100 years ago and you look at where we are now and you think we've come so far, but there's still so far to go. And I mean, I know in like modern studies we studied inequality, and I was in a class learning about gender inequality, and so many people, even being faced with these statistics, were saying, but that's not true, or they're just saying that, and it's so wrong. In order how to tackle it, I think just kind of it's very difficult, but SOP are always kind of trying, and also projects like Young Women Lead and other organisations like that, and reports like that sexual harassment report are always good at kind of showing the real problem and kind of uncovering the truth. So maybe the promotion of those would help. But yeah, go for it. Yes,
of course. I was going to ask you, Kay Marie, this is something that you'll find at community level as well, for all sorts of reasons.
Definitely, but I think we also have to think there's lots of good work going on as well. So we have LGBT Youth Scotland going into our schools in the Scottish borders. Within the next 3 or 4 months, every single high school in the Scottish borders will have its charter mark. That's now filtering down into primary schools. We have the 16 Nights of Action with Rape Crisis, where young men are being spoken to and being asked to pledge that they won't commit violence against women as they're growing up. So I think, you know, yes, we've got a long way to go, but there's a lot of actual really good work happening in the community out there.
All right, I'm going to ask our council representative and our Parliament representative, because one of the worries that I pick up is that we talk a lot about the theory of how things should be relative to this, and we tick a lot of boxes. How do we absolutely make sure that we're getting the message across in our schools and that the guidance isn't just theory. How do you do it locally and how do we assess it nationally? Alison, locally.
Yeah, locally, when I was first elected as a councillor, one of the first things I did was organise a seminar involving lots of people locally called From Everyday Sexism to Sexual Harassment. And many of the local schools turned up. They surprised me. Teachers brought along their pupils to that seminar, and I was really pleased to see them. And it showed that there was a hunger for some kind of support, and it also showed that recognition that we need to call things out from the very beginning, from that everyday sexism right forward to everything. Locally at councils, many councils are working with the White Ribbon organisation, the White Ribbon Society, which is encouraging people to take the pledge that Kay Marie has talked about there, the pledge to men to stand up against that everyday sexism, because it starts with those words, it starts with those comments, and then can escalate into something far worse, and we need to cut it out at that very beginning level. So again, it's working with others. I've mentioned inclusion, I've mentioned White Ribbon Scotland. It's working together. It's working together with a common aim to try and address something locally is the way how we can take things forward.
Alison.
I think this issue has had more attention in recent times. You know, the TIE campaign for inclusive education in schools, I think, is key. I think there has been more focus on what young people are getting from PSE at school. You know, is it fit for purpose? Does it actually work in 2019? But informal discussions and just this, the fact that we have, you know, a very switched on Scottish Youth Parliament, I think, is key. Every campaign the Youth Parliament has brought forward has borne fruit. It's made a great difference. So I think engaging with our bodies of young people and making sure that, you know, we're in here, we're older, we might think things are okay because we read some reports, but are we really listening? You know, if we're sitting on a bus full of young people going to school, what's that conversation sounding like? Is there tolerance of, you know, comments that just simply are beyond the pale? So I think keep listening, keep making sure our legislation is fit for purpose, but mostly keep engaging with our young people who are living it. Because when it isn't right, I mean, going to school every day can be a bit of a nightmare. And I think social media has made that worse because often there's no escape from the trolling or the snide comments or just that little dig that might make a nice morning turn into one that's a bit more challenging. Right.
As always in these sessions, lots of questions start to come in towards the end of the session. So I'm going to try very hard to get them all a hearing. So I'm going to answer one of them here because we've already to some extent discussed disability issues. And there's a question here about making sure that deaf women are given opportunities to stand in Parliament. Can I just say on behalf of the Parliament here, that's something that we have been looking at very, very closely. And we do work closely with signers. One of the difficulties is being able to get people to come in and sign. There's a shortage of signers because BSL has now become a defined language. I'm really pleased that we did that in our Parliament. Hard work by some MSPs. And it is challenging. We haven't had a completely non-hearing member of the Scottish Parliament yet, but all resources would be put in there. And can I just, for my local area, South Lanarkshire Council has just elected a deaf councillor, about which I am absolutely delighted, but we'll also be watching very, very closely to see what resources and assistance is put in hand to help Grant with that. So a very important question. Another question here is about encouraging girls from a very young age. So even through primary school, we've all been in primary schools and see how the roles of girls and boys seem to be very defined from an early age. An ongoing problem. How do we make sure that we girls see themselves as future leaders? Kay Marie.
I suppose it's everybody's responsibility. In my day job, I'm a homeschool link worker, so I worked in primary schools right across the Scottish borders. And yeah, it's our chance to give the kids the right message. just to hark back to the likes of the Common Ride, and as I say, for a long time, women weren't involved. And, you know, I'll go into schools and you'll hear, you know, young girls saying, oh, you know, but girls shouldn't be riding in it. And they are repeating the messages that they get told at home. So it's about, you know, challenging those things and saying, no, actually, why can't you ride in it? No, why can't you do that? And questioning that and getting the children to think about it and to think, you know, actually, I can do that. So I think it's a case of it's everybody's responsibility, you know, to encourage everyone, encourage young girls to take part in everything and to think, actually, you know, people are saying, I can't, there's no reason why I can't. I can do it.
Would any of you particularly like to add to that?
I think starting at an early age is good. One thing I've noticed, the Parliament has an ongoing education project where all of our local schools come in and we can have a question and answer session, and watch when you're doing those sessions, see how many of the hands that go up are boys or girls, because sometimes I find a notable difference, and I think that maybe tells you something that's going on in classrooms that shouldn't. I think sometimes we do still need to encourage girls and young women more, and it's not because the talent isn't there. So I think starting off, I think the fact that young people in Scotland can come into their Parliament is helpful, because there's that whole you can't be what you don't see idea. So I think it's up to those of us who are in these elected positions to make sure we're speaking to as many young people as we can as well.
Yeah, and it's never too young to start. I think it's an important message as well. A lot of people in politics now started their working and still do work in the community groups, work in community empowerment initiatives, work very actively in those areas. Young children can get involved from a very young age in that kind of leadership work, that kind of cafes for older people in their communities, sharing food with different groups in their communities. They can do that from a young age. We need to encourage leadership right at the very beginning, to encourage people to say, yes, we can do that. And the other thing, of course, is for all of us to tell her story. Make sure the positive role models are out there so people can see women are in positions and can do it.
Could I just raise something else as well? What you also find is that when you speak to, you know, really young children, you know, you'll talk to girls and girls will say, I want to be an astronaut, I want to do this, I want to do that. But the difference is once you get into those teenage years, and I don't know what happens, whether it's society, whether it's people telling them they can't, you know, some of that is lost when they get to the teenage years. So for being young children, they have all this view of the world and I can do this. And then by the time they get ready to leave school, they've been beaten down, they've been told, you're a woman, you're a girl, you can't do it. So I think, yes, I think although we give the messages, we need to keep that right the way through school.
Yeah, I think it's really important to start young.
That again, your mic.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think it's really important to start young, and almost in the home as well. You know, I was raised by a really strong woman who told me that I was a strong woman, so here I am. So I think that's important, but also in the classroom for those who maybe aren't as lucky to have that kind of an influence at home as well. I've lost my train of thought now. But yeah, starting young is really important. So, yeah, definitely.
Okay. And talking of young, Eve by email is concerned about increasing youth participation when young people can't vote, so can it influence policy directly? So, of course, just for clarification, we now have voting at 16 for local authority elections and Scottish Parliament elections. It's still 18 for Westminster and 18 for the European Union. Hopefully that will still matter as we move on. So how do we increase youth participation in politics, Katie?
I think the answer to that is SYP, to be honest.
Can I throw a spanner in your works here? There is perhaps a perception, and I know that the Youth Parliament have carried out studies in this. There is perhaps a perception that the Youth Parliament, council initiatives for young people's boards, tends to be for those whose parents are involved in politics, or tends to be for those who are quite advantaged in the school system. So how do you dig deep?
I think almost that kind of makes it even more important to actually participate in the SYP and also your local youth forums and councils. I work with the Highland Youth Parliament as well and also Inverness Youth Forum, so it's not just SYP but also on a local level. And if you do feel that way about it, then it's even more important for you to get involved and have your say, and either find out for yourself that it isn't, which in my opinion isn't, or change it if you find out that it is when you go. So I think that's really important. SYP are really good at kind of standing up for young people, and we have managed to influence policy such as the UNCRC. So I think that's probably your next best bet if you can't vote but you're still wanting to get involved in politics. I know that's what I did, and I found it wonderful. So
I think we should encourage activism and protest. We should encourage activism and protest with our young people. Definitely, in the climate change protest that's going on in the 20th. Climate change process that are going on the 20th of September, you know, that's amazing. And, you know, we should be actively encouraging our young people to take part, to stand up for what they believe in.
I'd rather you didn't. Nothing personal. But as I said, I've just had another huge batch of questions come in. I'll ask you to, it's related, I'll ask you to address this one, please, Alison, from Mariam by email. Is there any correlation between deprivation and a hesitance to get into politics? She actually says the average stereotypical politician is usually from a middle-class background. I think that's maybe a perception that doesn't always meet reality, so can you address that too?
Well, maybe I'll quote the £17,000 for an elected councillor to earn as a salary then, and if you're living in struggling, difficult circumstances, you know, that can you actually do that? It's not necessarily just deprivation. It's people on low income. It's people with family responsibilities. Can you actually do that? I think this is part of the work we have to do to increase diversity in our groups. If we are looking at our politicians, if we're supporting people even before they become elected. You know, it's hard work being a candidate. It involves time. If you are trying to hold down a job, have you time to actually go out and canvass? Have you time to go out and get yourself selected in the first place? It's something we have to talk to our political parties about as well, and the support they give and the expectations they have. Because unless we change right from that beginning, we're not going to get diversity we require in our council chambers, in local government, in Scottish government either. Because people with lived experience can make a huge difference. People who can express their own experiences, can talk about their own backgrounds, can make a huge difference in the development of our policy within councils, within the Scottish Government as well. I know we've had examples of that locally where people have been able to talk from the heart about what they know about struggles in life. We're making policy, we're making budget decisions. Listening to those voices makes a real difference. And the bit I wanted to say earlier as well, when we're encouraging young people, yeah, I am, because I wanted to mention those other groups as well. I think it's important for us to acknowledge, and I'm going to just say that just recently we've got the Gypsy Traveller Youth Assembly, for example, being set up, and I did want to mention those to try and say we've got other organisations as well of young people having a voice.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it's the concerns about all of these things are there because I've got another batch of questions about equalities and about barriers to participation. I'm going to have to slot them together here. There's concerns about black and minority ethnic prospects because they face an ethnic penalty in elections. Not just in elections of the public, but also within parties. That's an issue. Another issue that's been raised is the participation of trans women in women's Scottish politics. I've got another fairly sensitive one that's come in about barriers to some women standing for elected office would be, for example, an abusive partner or former partner. Is there support there, and where should it come from? So these are huge issues that I'm lumping together here. Alison.
Yeah, I think, you know, Talat spoke very eloquently, and isn't it shocking that 20 years on, the Parliament has not yet had an ethnic minority woman representative? I mean, that is, it's truly appalling. We can't sit back and think that that's in any way acceptable. So, you know, all of our political parties have got to try much, much harder. That has to change. And the same applies to trans women. And, you know, deprivation and coming from a background where you've experienced domestic abuse, I mean, these things just annihilate your confidence. They make it hard to go out to the shops, never mind to stand for political office. So they have to be tackled. And when you put yourself out in the public domain, you're kind of seen as fair game. And I think that question of a domestic abuser perhaps putting someone off, if you dare to stick your head above that parapet, I'll be there telling people what all your many faults and failings. So that is something that we have to consider. But I think we sort of started off today saying gender representation is key, but this Parliament will not have succeeded until it truly represents the makeup of the people of Scotland. Until we've done that, we've not done our job properly. 20 years old now, we've got to do more, and we've got to do more now. And yeah, I think we all, when we're developing our manifestos, have got to commit to do that we're going to actually put in steps to make sure that our own representation on these benches mirrors the people of Scotland, and then the Parliament will have a better chance of doing that.
Can I ask you three to agree with Alison on this, because we're coming to a close?
I think it's extremely important that we put more money into women's services, and that breaks down the barriers.
Key point.
Yeah.
Key point, the finance. Now, I'm going to make a couple of comments from what has come from people before I go on to the final question. I've got a comment here that says, I'm finding it difficult listening to how it's difficult to get support in place for people with disabilities. Reasonable adjustments have been in place since 2004, but still it's not filtering into public life, politics, etc. It's not good enough. So I think that's a very valid comment that we should all take on board. I've also had a comment about, we're talking about public service, public boards, how we now have 50-50. How do we get the message out to the private sector as well? That is extremely important. Now, I'm sorry for all those who have submitted questions that I can't take, but just as a quick roundup from the panel, I've kept two to last and I'm lumping them in together. I've scribbled them down here. Has it been worth it where you've ended up? Has it been worth it? And how much did you learn on the job? Katie?
It's definitely been worth it. Like, I've got no doubts about that. I've learned, as I mentioned in my wee spiel earlier, I've learned so much that I just don't think I would have been able to learn without being an MSIP, and I'm sure that I'll still learn a lot more in my next 2 years. I'm kind of writing my personal statement at the moment for uni, and there's so much that I'm using from SYP for it, which I'm realising just how much it's taught me. And a lot of it was on the job. I think, although I was quite politically engaged, and I mean, I thought I was quite knowledgeable before I joined SYP, there's so much more that I've learned. So yeah, it's definitely worth it, no doubts.
Absolutely, you will not regret getting yourself more involved. I've learned on the job massively. As I said, left school after my hire, so I have just learned and learned and learned. I've regarded politics as my sort of own personal university. Met people that I would never have met elsewhere, challenged myself in ways that I never thought I could. And now I would probably say there's not very much would faze me, and that's all been about just taking those steps with support. You can achieve things in politics that you can't achieve elsewhere. You can be part of a pressure group, but changing legislation is absolutely amazing. You know, an amendment, a Green amendment that I moved to the Social Security Bill, means that when people are seeking benefits related to disability in the future, they won't have to undergo those humiliating, awful face-to-face assessments unless it's necessary. I'm hugely proud of that. But you know, I just make the point, I'm fronting up a fabulous effort. I didn't achieve that on my own. Currently, I've got a members' bill going through the Parliament for the first time, another, you know, hopefully landmark piece of legislation for me. So there are things you can do in politics that you can't do elsewhere. If this isn't your bag, though, just get involved in any way you can. You'll find it transformative, fabulous, interesting. You'll meet loads of pals, too.
How woman was that? I didn't do it myself. Lots of people helped me. She did it. Alison.
Is it worth it? Yes, we're working with our communities to deliver services to those communities and make a difference for those communities, listening and working with people locally. So yes, when people are able to work like that, it is indeed worth it. Learning on the job? Yes, certainly, big time. I was first elected in 2012. I was the first Labour councillor in Aberdeenshire. I used to joke I didn't even inherit a filing cabinet. There was nothing, no idea about standing orders, how policy boards, anything worked at all. Certainly had to learn on the job. But there's people out there to support, to give help, to give advice, to tell you how the systems are about. And the judgment is, I suppose, working out which ones to believe and which ones not to believe in the political environment, but that's another story. But working with people, learning together is really, really important. As Alison's already said, we can't be experts on absolutely everything. There's areas that local government services deliver that are not part of my knowledge at all, and we're there in the council chamber discussing them. You work with others, you listen to advice, you hear presentations, and you form your opinion. So yes, learning on the job is crucial. Don't think that you don't have enough experience to stand, you don't know enough to stand. Nobody does. Nobody has enough experience, nobody knows enough. Get ahead, do it, and you'll learn there while you're working.
Kay Marie.
I suppose I got involved because I saw the rough end. I saw families deciding whether they put food on the table or stuck money in the electric meter. Decided that I wanted to do something to make a change and to make a difference. I got involved with the local community council. I also got involved with my trade union, so I'm now the branch secretary of the local trade union. I also do the lead negotiations with Scottish Borders Council to do with employment. So all those things I'm learning constantly. I'm learning about how, you know, ideas are made, how people direct the funding and things like that. I suppose, was it worth it? I suppose it'll only be worth it when I get to stand out there and I've got a voice and I can make a change.
Good. I want to thank everyone who asked a question and to our panellists for their responses. And I will finish this wee bit session by asking all of you a question, which came from the floor. And I think it's pretty wonderful. This question is, would you agree we should be teaching our daughters not to be princesses looking for a glass slipper, but how to shatter the glass ceiling? I'm going to try. They are called the Joyous Choir. Thank you very, very much. And that was a performance of Love Trumps Hate. Can I also thank all of our speakers once again for their excellent contributions this session, and of course to all of you for your participation today, not only here in our chamber but across Scotland at the 4 regional hubs in Aberdeen, Lerwick, Stornoway and Lochgilphead, and online to anyone who is watching today's event. Thank you to all our members who have taken part in the event today. I want to welcome Angela Constance. She's here somewhere. People want to grab her for a chat. Angela Constance, MSP for Livingston. And in Aberdeen Hub, we have Maureen Watt, MSP, who has joined some constituents there. And Beatrice Wishart, our newest MSP, is in the Lerwick Regional Hub as well. Thank you to all of you. And I'd now like to invite all delegates to join us for lunch in the garden lobby. Look out for the events assistants who will assist you to the nearest exit. And thank you.